right. Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, May 1st at 6 o'clock, and I will call to order the City of Oregon City Budget Committee meeting. Staff will please call the roll.
Commissioner McGriff is excused today. Commissioner Smith is also excused. Commissioner Mitchell? Here. Commissioner Wilson?
Here. Oh, sorry. Not me.
Excused.
He's also excused. Commissioner Marl?
Here.
Commissioner Arnello?
Here.
Excuse me, I should be saying budget committee member Weber?
Here.
Committee member Hunt?
Here.
Committee member Peterson?
Here.
And committee member Gifford?
Here. All right, thank you. So tonight we are going to continue on with the budget presentation, but prior to that, we are going to get a presentation on state shared revenues. So, Mr. Zook. And I will open a public hearing on the election to receive state shared revenues. Now, Mr. Zook.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Budget Committee. This evening is kicking off with a requirement that the Budget Committee do by law in order to receive state shared revenues. And state shared revenues, you have in your packet, you have on page 2 of the packet, you have a report, but I'm also going to give you a verbal overview. State shared revenues come in the form of fuel taxes, cigarette taxes, marijuana taxes, and Oregon Liquor Control Commission tax as well. There are other taxes that the city does not receive, such as 911 tax. If we had our own dispatch, we would be receiving that. This is not in your packet, but it's a handy overview of, can we get the top to go away? There we go, thanks. So on this chart, on the right, across the top is the different types of taxes that we get and the distribution that we receive and basically how it's allocated. You can see that cigarette tax is based on, as an example, per capita, liquor tax is per capita, marijuana tax is a percentage of revenue, and then the gas tax is per capita as well. And the second row down is how frequently we receive those. Some of those are monthly, some of them are quarterly. And then the bulk of this slide describes what the requirements are to receive those. And the majority of these come because the city basically certifies that it offers at least 4 of the services, such as, in our case, we don't have a fire department, that's a separate district, but police protection, street construction, sanitary, sewer, that is really blurry, planning, zoning, and one or more utility services. So we, by far, qualify for those. And we will, the City Commission will, at the end of adopting the budget, they will set a resolution that says we qualify for these, and we'll send that off to the state. What tonight's public hearing is about is this first column here of liquor tax. 14% of the liquor revenues is separated out from the other 20% of liquor revenues. And in order to do that, not only do we have to provide those services, but we also have to give the opportunity to the public to weigh in on in this case, the possible uses of that revenue. At the very bottom of the slide, I've put a row that says Oregon City budget, and that illustrates essentially which fund and the amount that's in the budget. Unfortunately, that's an account number. You probably don't, that doesn't mean anything to you, but majority of all of this goes into the general fund, and we essentially have budgeted as general fund revenue fungible for all of the services of the general fund. State gas tax actually goes into the transportation fund, and it can only be used on roads, streets, and bike paths. So the proposed use for these, the possible uses as illustrated in our general fund budget, as also demonstrated on the page 2 of the packet, it details out the 5 different types of fuel that revenue streams that we receive and the amounts in each year. And basically, as I said, the gas tax is dedicated to our roads, and the rest is just fungible in the general fund. When I say fungible, I basically mean that it's considered general fund revenue, like property taxes, and it just goes towards the entire service. We don't really delegate like this little chunk of money towards this specific purpose. So that is what the staff has proposed. That is what the city has done prior. That is what a lot of cities do. I would say most cities in Oregon do it that way. But in order to receive that, we have to have a public hearing and give the public comment an opportunity to comment. So that is my staff report, Chair Morrow. At the end of the action that will need to be taken by this committee tonight would be after public comment is opened, then there is a motion that will be it's on this slide here, and it's also on let's go with the motion on the slide. That is the correct one. There was a typo on the one in the packet. It's 14% rather than 20%. So with that, Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. So I do not have any comment forms for this agenda item. We still will be accepting public comment for the actual proposed budget, but if there is anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this matter, please let us know. Number 3 is going to be public comment for the proposed budget. Okay. Yes. So seeing no public comments, I will, Mr. Gifford.
If we're open to questions for clarifications. At the top of on the handout here, it says the city's 20% of OLCC net revenues.
Yeah, the 20% is, this budget committee and the city commission doesn't have to take any action in order to do the 20%.
Right.
So that's referring to all of the rest of these state shared revenues that also don't require any action other than to certify that we provide for the services.
So the 14% is in addition to that?
Yes, yes.
And do we have a dollar amount on what that specific?
I can't see that screen, but if you can read it. It's also in the memo. It's called state shared revenue,
Right.
state revenue sharing on this table. So it's the top line.
For the proposed biennium, it's $8,495,600?
That's the entire amount for all 5 resources. The 14% that is requiring this, right, is $835,000 for the biennium, the top row.
The top one?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So is that in addition to what we would normally receive? I'm trying to find out how much extra are we getting
Well,
if this is adopted.
we don't get any extra necessarily. I mean, the total amount that we plan to get is the $8,400,000. It's a low-hanging bar to get this money, so we just have to do these steps in order to get it. The $835,000, it's already programmed into the budget, so it's not going to be on top of anything that's already been proposed.
Okay, when I hear additional 14%, I think, well, we're getting more. I just don't know how much more.
Let's not use the word additional. It's just 14% of liquor revenue and as opposed to the 20%. It's just a bifurcation that happens at the state level through the state legislature and Oregon Constitution or ORS. So they just divvy it out. It's all one tax to the citizen.
Right.
They just have different allocations on certain portions. And that's just the nature of legislative process,
Okay.
you know.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Other questions, Mr. Hunt?
Actually, if you could go back to that prior screen, the top left box, I was surprised on that 14%, that it says the distribution includes that complex formula, including, not surprisingly, population, but also income and city property taxes. Which way does that cut? Do cities that have higher property taxes get more or less? How does that formula?
I honestly don't know because I don't see the formula. We just get the distribution. I'd have to get back to you on that specific.
So just as a follow-up, so it seems like as opposed to everything else up there where we really can't control to a large degree our per capita or other things, I mean, theoretically, that would be one that we would have some control over.
At a very small level, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I'm sure it's obviously one small factor in the distribution. I just wasn't aware the liquor tax from the state had that factor. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, so I will close the public hearing and we can deliberate. Before we go on, I think just for the general public's knowledge, I want to reiterate something that was said at our last meeting, which is that one of the vestiges of Measure 110 post-legislative, if you want to call it fix, is that the funding structure still remains that diverts a significant portion of what used to come to the city in the form of marijuana tax revenues, and that is still the funding scheme that we are working under. So I just wanted to highlight that for members of the public one more time. Do we have deliberations?
Would you like a motion?
Hearing none, I would love a motion.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we elect to receive the 14% OLCC tax of state shared revenue.
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. If you would please call the roll, Mr. Wiley.
Committee Member Mitchell? Aye. Committee Member Arnello?
Aye.
Committee Member Weber?
Aye.
Committee Member Hunt?
Aye.
Committee Member Peterson?
Aye.
Committee Member Gifford?
Aye.
And Chair Morrow?
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is public comment for the proposed budget. So first, we will go to our online visitors. Carla Laws, I believe, should be on there. You will have 3 minutes, and please state your name and city of residence for the record.
My name is Carla Laws. I live in Oregon City. I'm also representing my neighborhood association, Elyville Neighborhood Association. I'm on here to address my concerns about the budget and concerning to our police officers and what that entails. There are soldiers on the ground. They have been there for us. We're growing. We have a tremendous amount of infill happening. I don't see how it's even possible that we cut. We need to increase our police force. So they're already at a deficit. And we have behavioral health issues increasing. We're taking on possibly homelessness, which brings in behavioral health issues. We have drug problems ever since COVID, before obviously, but a tremendous increase since COVID, and it still hasn't tamed down. We have issues with, just overall our traffic safety, a tremendous amount increase in traffic. And obviously with Malala Avenue, that's going to increase rapidly. So I don't know how that's possible, and it's gonna have to come from somewhere else because, our police officers need our support. I appreciate you listening, and I know you got a lot to do, so I'll cut this short, but thank you.
Thank you, we appreciate it. Up next, I have Sherry.
Could you push the button?
Okay, there we go. Green light. All right. I'm loud. My name is Sherry Atanasov, and I've lived in Oregon City for 19 years. First of all, I know that the police department has been short-staffed for years. While our city population and calls for service have increased dramatically, we have not added new officers in about 8 years. I'm also aware that the records section has been short-staffed for years, and I know they just hired a much-needed record specialist last year, and they're still short. As a former police records specialist, I know how important a fully staffed records section is to the officers and to the public. Support staff is often the heart of the department. It was where I worked. Reducing staffing simply isn't sustainable, and while it may appear to have short-term benefits, the long-term outcome will have a very negative impact on the police department staff and the citizens of our city. When officer numbers go down, response times are longer. This puts the public's safety and their lives at risk as they wait for help. And although unwarranted, the officers are seen in a more negative light because the citizens are not getting the help they need when they need it. Also, it's publicly known that when police staff are cut, it's guaranteed to increase crime in our city. Fewer officers equals slower response times, if at all. And as they say, when the cat is away, the mice will play. Crime will increase. Thirdly, with less staffing, the remaining staff may be required to work more and longer hours with less time off. This leads not only to officer burnout, but it also endangers the officers as they are more stressed, more tired, and their personal response times decrease due to exhaustion. It is much harder for an officer to be fully aware of what's going on in a situation that needs 100% of their attention when they are working so much. They also will not always have backup when needed. These extended hours also lead to a higher turnover within the department, and I know several staff are close to retirement, and staff cuts will only make the situation worse, not better, over the next few years. Finally, less officers and staff lead to less community outreach. It's important that we have officers out in the public eye in positive situations. This visibility leads to increased support for the police department. Citizens who see the officers appreciate them, interact with them positively, and are more likely to vote yes when it comes to taxes that pay much of the PD's budget. So please, let's find some other creative ways to cut the budget without putting the officers and citizens' safety at risk. Oregon City has some of the finest officers and support staff anywhere. I participated in the 2024 Citizens Academy and have had several interactions with officers and support staff in my 19 years living here. Every contact has been professional, knowledgeable, friendly, and even humorous at times. There isn't anything I would not do to support OCPD, and I would like to see them fully funded and supported by the city. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we move on to our next public comment, and because I didn't want to interrupt, is that our fix? Okay, so next up, I have Jackie Hammond-Williams.
Good evening, Jackie Hammond-Williams, Park Place neighborhood resident of 35 years. In that 35 years, I've had a few interactions with the police, not personally, but I mean, you know what I mean. And it's always been top-notch. It's always been really professional. Once was a really dangerous situation. A neighbor of ours was being beaten up. It was her husband. We called the cops. They came. I have witnessed such compassion from our police. This is an excellent force. We have a cohesive, organized, morale is high in our PD. By cutting the budget, this is not going to continue. They are already stretched. They have not had any new numbers of patrol officers in 8 years. And you think how much our city has grown in 8 years. We have the new homeless shelter or services, big building coming. I think there's probably going to be calls for that, extra calls. As Sherry said, behavioral health, I think it was Carla actually said that. Oregon City has changed. Even in 8 years, we have changed. And I don't want to see our patrol officers, our PD, demoralized. I don't want to see them put in danger. We're entering a pretty turbulent time in American history. I don't really think right now is the right time to actually cut policing. I'm not quite as organized as the other speakers, but I also just want to throw out there something that's really passionate. I've asked the city to actually include in the budget, the police budget, $15,000 for a canine retirement fund. It's a health fund. It's for when the canines retire and potentially have some health issues. And so this would back up the care that they receive in their retirement. I mean, they are sworn officers. They do great work in the city. But that apart from everything, we just do not need to cut the budget for the police. And I just urge you to find, money somewhere else. Maybe we don't need so many consultants. Maybe we don't need so many studies. And maybe we can trim here and trim there, but we do not need to cut our police force. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, I have Betty Mumm.
Good evening, Betty Mumm, Oregon City. I've lived here for over 50 years, and I have seen a lot of change in our city. So tonight, I'm here to ask that you sell the old public work building on Center. I know that there's problems with it. I know there's a lot of things I don't understand about it. But if you could sell that, developers are doing amazing things with property these days. I think that could be a value. That would be giving us more property tax money in our pockets. It would go back on the tax rolls, which has been off for several years, because I worked there when I was 17. That's a long time. So I want to encourage you guys to look at other revenue sources, and I want to encourage you not to cut our police officers. And please remember, when you hire a police officer, you have to pay for their car and their uniforms and all that kind of stuff. So that could be an additional $80,000. I don't know. The chief could probably correct me on that. But just so you think about those things, it is important that our city have a good livability, which I heard a lot at the last meeting. But if we don't have police, fire, street, sewer, water, we are not going to have a livable city. So please be kind and think of the citizens' pockets when you're looking at increasing the property tax 5 or 10 cents. It's not a lot, I get that, but you got 17% for PGE. You got 8% for gas. Now you want to raise the city property taxes, and I understand why. But is there other avenues that you have not explored, that staff has not looked at, Tony, that could be explored? Like selling other properties in our city that we don't use anymore. So that's my spiel. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All right, so I have no other comment cards unless there's anyone else in the audience or online. All right, moving on from public comment, we will move on to general business. The first item we have, item 4A, approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections or edits? I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from May 11th, 2023. And 18th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Next, we will move on to the budget deliberations and pick up where we left off at our last meeting. Mr. Conkle.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. So we're going to go ahead and get started where we left off, which is at Parks and Recreation on page 66 of your budget book. Before I get started, just to add from the discussion of when we ended and some of the public comment that you heard tonight, I think it's important to note that we created the homeless liaison officer, which was originally going to be a Parks and Rec ranger. This all started with when homelessness really started to become more visible, more prevalent, not only in Oregon City, but throughout the region, the state, and the country. And we were seeing camping in parks. And we sat down and we had a discussion. How do we do this? You can't send, a park employee into some of these situations, right? You have issues, how are you gonna go in there by yourself, et cetera, et cetera. So we came up with the homeless liaison officer and we funded it from marijuana tax. Since then, we've added resources as we've kind of changed and evolved, and state laws have come down and court decisions have come down on how we can address homelessness. We've invested in a behavioral health specialist. We've invested in a case manager. We've just received a grant, a 3-year grant from the county for additional case managers, as well as a community court. So how we're addressing this issue is evolving. The homeless liaison officer position has not been filled since April of 2023. That is over 2 years ago, that position has been vacant. We're not taking officers out of rotation, off of the street. This is a special assignment that was created in response to a special, unique circumstance. Those circumstances are changing and how we address those are changing. Would I love to keep every position that we have across every city department? Absolutely. Can we afford to with the revenue streams and the expenditures that we have right now? No. Now I leave that to you as the budget committee to decide. Off the top of my head, I think the homeless liaison officer is probably about $185,000 a year. So if we add that back, it's just an additional expenditure that drives us further into imbalance moving forward over the next 2 years, making much more difficult decisions for the next year 3 and year 4. We tried to propose this budget in a way that minimized the impact on existing staff that are in positions right now providing services. Is it opportunistic? Is it luck of the draw that they're vacant right now? I don't know, but they are. And they're in the departments that have the most significant impact on the general fund moving forward. And I think I explained this a little bit last time. It does no good to cut somebody from the sewer department. Those are utility driven. It has zero impact on the general fund. So out of this big pie that we have of revenues and expenditures that we have, the pie gets really smaller, much smaller when you think about general fund impacted positions and expenditures. So I just wanted to point that out. This wasn't done because we don't support police, because we don't understand that there are increasing demands on police services as well as every other service that we provide. We are outpacing the revenue streams that we have available to us. And so that's why we're here to do that work tonight. But I just wanted to put a little context into the department has been running for over 2 years with this position vacant. And we have brought additional resources in terms of behavioral health specialists and caseworkers to try to augment and address what we're seeing in the community based on the laws that we have to abide by in addressing these situations. So I'll go ahead and stop there and just see, are there any questions about that or anything else we talked about last week, or any questions that might have come up once you got to go home and think about it for a week?
Mr. Gifford.
Thanks for that recap, Tony. I thought that was very insightful. I had a couple of questions. I should have written them down. One is, and I spoke with Mr. Zook about this before, I said it's still not real clear to me. Another source of income that we have is the neighborhood grant program, the Good Neighbor program that we have with WES. WES gives us about $200,000 a year, and I don't know where in the budget that shows. And maybe that could be clarified.
Okay, when we get to Parks and Rec, we'll walk through that.
All right, is that where that goes?
It is.
Okay. Secondly, is that there were a couple of written comments under citizen comments, and I don't know, are those being just, if anybody wants to read them, they can read them? Are we
Correct,
gonna
they're in your
discuss
packets.
those? We're going to discuss those at all?
It's up to you what you'd like to discuss. So everybody has it in their packets that have been provided to them.
Well, there were two specifically that I can remember. One was from Jim Nacita, and the other was from DOCA. And I thought a couple of good points were made in both of them. So I don't know if we want to discuss them. I think I understand them, but
So are there any other thoughts? So yeah, well, let's take this opportunity right now before we continue on with Parks and Rec. Are there any thoughts on the comments that were submitted prior to tonight? Yes.
Thank you. Are the comments that we have in these packets, the emails, it looks like going to be made public on
Yes.
the website?
Yes. So we did have a letter from DOCA requesting an increase, and then we did have a letter from Mr. Nacita.
They rescinded their request.
Oh, they rescinded?
Correct.
Okay, so we had a letter from Mr. Nacita requesting that we, in the future, not deliberate on the budget until after the Urban Renewal Commission budget has been formally approved. I think that is a reasonable request considering the position that we're in right now. So I don't know what action we might be able to take on that, if that would be a motion or, but let's, I'm open to deliberation first. Let's discuss that.
it was my understanding that I thought heard from Mr. Zook that we needed to do the urban renewal first so that the city budget process would have some sort of a number that they could work with. Is that why we did it first?
There is no right or wrong answer to the order. Considering the process that happened 2 years ago, we decided to switch and do the urban renewal first so that the city's budget could at least have some semblance of knowledge on that. But honestly, either way you go, there's no right or wrong answer. This is all a public process. We can't pre-script it, so it was a choice. It doesn't really matter if we go back to the other, there's no right or wrong.
Mr. Peterson?
So just so folks remember, so 2 years ago, the Urban Renewal Budget Committee recommended that the Urban Renewal Agency collect 100% of the tax increment financing. We were moving forward through the adoption process. We adopted the city budget with that assumption. Urban Renewal Committee then, after the City Commission adopts the budget, Urban Renewal Committee changes it, under collects. So we switched it up this time, went the other way around. Once again, they're two separate entities that act independently. It just happens that one does have an impact on the other, that being urban renewal, and what they decide to collect impacts potentially what comes into the general fund.
Did you, okay. Yes.
Is that within our purview? Is this committee's purview to determine which comes first, or is that up to Mr. Zook?
No, I don't think it is.
No?
I think the city commission, I don't know, could maybe decide if
That's
they
what I
would
think.
direct us
We
to
don't need
never
to
bring
decide.
urban renewal, but they're separate entities.
Exactly.
I don't, I realize there's a 95% crossover of those who sit on it, but they are technically separate entities in and of themselves.
Commissioner Mitchell?
I think the issue, and that Mr. Nacita, that echoes awful.
Turn that one.
That Mr. Nacita was trying to point out, and does make sense, is that we started the urban renewal budget process before we started the city budget, but we don't get to a final decision by the Urban Renewal Commission itself, which leaves you in the position of having to guess at what the Urban Renewal Commission will ultimately approve, and that's the spot we're in now. So, you know, in terms of getting one done that much earlier, I don't know if that's possible, but it makes, to me, it makes sense that we would have a firm number before we come to this process. But how that works in terms of man hours and your deadlines and, you know, trying to guess what beginning fund balances are going to be and all of that, I don't know. But on the surface, it makes sense.
Well, keep in mind it can go either way. I mean, the city can, the urban renewal can go first, and the city can they can adopt their budget, and the city's budget process can come after, like it has this week or this year, and we don't yet know what the Urban Renewal Commission is going to do. I mean, there's 4 bodies here, not only just 2 entities, but 4 bodies. There's a budget committee and a governing body. So it can go the other way. I mean, it can go both ways. You can't, unless you run them simultaneously. I mean, there's really.
Okay, maybe I'm missing something. What the city budget committee does not affect urban renewal. What the Urban Renewal Commission does affect the city budget. So wouldn't you want to get that one out of the way first? To finalize the number that you have to put into the city budget? Maybe that's probably a discussion.
Ideally, at the end of the day, the number is going to be what it is. I mean, we're not going to hold up the whole process of creating the city budget. We can't until this urban renewal decides what they're going to do. Like the process, by the time we get to urban renewal hearings, the city budget is pretty much done. We start in December.
I see what you're saying.
So, you know, the question is going to be if urban renewal decides to collect 100% as proposed by the budget committee, we're going to be coming back over the next 2 years with additional cuts through budget amendments to address the revenue shortfall. So, you know, yeah, it would be wonderful to know ahead of time, but there is a lot of work that goes into it up front. And quite honestly, until we started kind of moving this number around, this has never ever been an issue, right? There was always just, you know, we've always collected 100%.
Yeah, okay.
But could we get the process done sooner? Sure. But 95% of the budgets, if not more, of the city budget is going to be done by the time the Urban Renewal Commission adopts. We can't wait till a decision's made, even if we started in January, February. You know, there's all kinds of work that goes into putting this budget together way before that.
Okay.
Keep in mind that the city, you received the city's budget the very first night the Urban Renewal Budget Committee met. So, I mean, we're doing those at the same time with maybe 2 weeks separate. And the production of these books and all the process, you have the budget calendar in front of you. You probably see 7 lines on that. There are about 30 lines on there that include newspaper publications, public notice, your own meeting schedule, the commission's meeting schedule, et cetera. So I mean, after doing this for 25 years, this is like just lock and load. And to Mr. Kunkel's point, I mean, this hasn't been an issue until the last, the budget cycle prior to this one. So normally they're predictable, and this time they have not been. So maybe this problem goes away with some predictability too.
So just one second. I think that Mr. Nacita made a very good point, and I do understand what staff is saying, given how last biennium's adjustments that we made put them in a situation that was pretty much the opposite of what we're in right now. And so recognizing that it does take a significant amount of time to get that proposed budget, I would recommend that we, for now, table this conversation until the city commission, given that this would in the end be a city commission decision, table this until the budget gets to the city commission in a couple of weeks, and we can have that conversation then, while also recognizing that in the end, regardless of which way they go in the future, it's still going to be up to the budget committee regardless to move around those dollars if there's more, or cut those dollars if there's less. So in the end, it's still going to be up to us and the city commission to make sure that everything zeroes out. So let's table that for now and keep going on with Parks and Recreation. Yes.
Before we proceed to Parks and Rec, the graffiti removal program, I believe that's the nuisance abatement program, page 63, 62 for everyone. Is that $20,000 a cap? Is that program limited to once budget's out, that program will stop, or could it potentially grow exponentially with demand?
I'm sorry, so what was your question? So once the money is spent, do we stop?
Yeah,
We would probably look at what the demand is and if there are other places that we can save to reallocate funds within that budget.
All right, please continue.
All right. So for Parks and Recreation, starting on page 66, 67. So here is what Mr. Gifford was asking about, the $400,000 for improvements at Clackamas Park, improve the West Good Neighbor funding that's available. So that money is being allocated to part of the West Good Neighbor agreement with Water Environmental Services is that these funds need to be spent within a certain boundary area, which is roughly, kind of think of 205, Willamette River, and Clackamas River. So kind of west, the Cove, Clackamas Park, John Storm Park, kind of that triangle that's in there. And so we've been utilizing those funds. We've done some tree mitigation work in there, some tree replacement, some path replacement, signage over the years. So moving forward, this is to move forward the commission goal for completing studies and engineering designs for Clackamas Park master plan improvements, as well as the construction and engineering and potential construction of the new boat ramp in Clackamas Park. Out of this process will come then an ask from the state probably the Marine Board for additional funding for actual construction costs once the plans are completed. Some of the larger capital outlay projects that we'll see, Wesley Lynn Dog Park, Hillendale Restroom, Pioneer Center roof replacement over the next 2 years as proposed in this budget. Here's just a little bit more detail on the capital outlay by division. The next slides will include capital outlays, which is comprised of funds from multiple funding sources. So think of general fund, system development charges, donation fund, grants, and other funding sources that we've been able to put together and leverage existing dollars to make improvements throughout the city. So just real quick, here's I talked a little bit about this, Wesley Lynn Park, Hillendale, Chapin Park Playground, Rivercrest Pathway, Park Place Park Improvements Phase 2, Wesley Lynn Swing Set, Rivercrest ADA, Memorial Benches, Parents of Murdered Children Phase 2 project at the cemetery. So these are some of the projects from capital outlay as well as their funding source. Pioneer Community Center, this is a big one for us, getting a roof replacement on that facility moving forward. And then we can break out now into the operational components for each of the departments. And so here really, this budget includes additional maintenance costs associated with inflation and increased material costs. The maintenance and services refers to supplies and equipment maintenance, vehicle maintenance, and tree maintenance accounts for the majority of these costs. The Metro local share funding for a new dog park and habitat restoration at Wesley Lynn Park and a restroom replacement at Hillendale Park. Next, we have the cemetery detail, which you can find on page 70. I guess before I go on, so this was the detail on page 68 and 69 as it relates to parks maintenance. Were there any questions on that one before I move forward with cemetery?
Mr. Hunt.
My question was actually back on 67, but that capital outlay line where it seems to show two things. One, it seems to show a significant decrease in dollars budget, especially over the 19-21 and 21-23 biennia. So it shows an overall decrease, but then it also just shows a $10,000 amount for the first year of the new biennium. Can you just speak to those two?
Yeah, you want to take that one, Matt?
Yeah, Dave, could you refer me back to, you're on page?
Yeah, page 67, the capital outlay.
The capital outlay in the first year shows 10 grand, the second year shows 520,000.
And in the two prior biennia, it shows, I should have brought my readers, but I think it's like 1.4 million and 1.6 million, and then it drops to 593, and then in the proposal, it drops to 530.
Yeah.
Do you want to call Jake?
Yeah.
Tom, Scott, come up. But essentially, isn't this because it's in the SDCs as well as donation fund?
Right, that is a good point. This 520 is a portion of what Mr. Conkle put into the slideshow up here. You're asking, this is the general funds portion, so you're asking why the general funds portion of Parks capital outlay has gone down. Okay.
First of all, hello, Budget Committee. My name is Scott Archer. I'm the brand new returning Parks and Recreation Director, and it's really great to be here. This is my second week back in the position, so I just wanted to be in support of our Deputy Director, Tom, who really assembled this budget and has kind of the working knowledge while I'm still getting fully up to speed. So I'm gonna defer to Tom here.
Yeah, and hello, Budget Committee. My name is Tom Kissinger. I'm the Deputy Director for Parks and Recreation. I was also not here during the 2019-2021 biennium, so this will be a little bit of kind of an assumption here. You know, what I'm looking at here from the capital outlay, that would have been the time that we would have been doing projects like Hazel Grove, Tyronis Woods, so full park build-outs. So that's probably why that number is much higher. We don't have any full park build-outs planned for this next biennium.
And that is correct, TSW and Hazel Grove Park. I appreciate the heads up on that question. I didn't realize that was one that you had sent to me earlier. So yeah, 3.3 million spent in the 19-21 budget was for those two parks, Tyronis Woods and Hazel Grove. 1.2 million in biennium 21-23 was for Hazel Grove. So.
All right, any other questions? Yes, please.
Since they're up, I mean, Tony or Matt may be able to answer it, but I guess another question I have does relate to, I mean, the Parks Department has done a good job identifying parts of the city that are, where there is park scarcity. And a lot of us have probably seen those bullseyes. I happen to live in the Gaffney Lane neighborhood, which is one of those bullseyes. And I know, because Tom and I have talked about this, that Tom's radar is kind of always up looking around. Where are potential future parks that could be acquired? And so, I mean, my biggest question is, I want to make sure we're setting aside enough resources so if somewhere in this biennium, the right parks, the right land in the right areas comes forward, you can at least acquire the land. Even if you don't have the dollars to build out the park, you can at least acquire the land. And I will acknowledge I'm sensitive to this issue because I used to live in the Jennings Lodge area where the old evangelical conference grounds decided to sell, and the county missed the opportunity on a 3-2 vote to purchase that. And all the trees were destroyed and it's 100% housing, no more park. So when you miss those opportunities, they're gone forever. So I guess, do you feel like, whether it's Gaffney Lane or Park Place or the other places you've identified in the bullseyes, with this budget, you've got the capacity when and if those opportunities come along in the coming biennium to get that land?
Yeah, so if I could have you turn to, so page 130 is Parks System Development Charges. The ending fund contingency on that is 8.6 million. So if there was a targeted property purchase, the SDCs, assuming it's SDC eligible, which I would assume it is, as part of a park expansion that's been identified, that's where those funds would be utilized or available. And then also on this, when we're looking at that $10,000, so here we also have capital outlay identified on the SDC sheet for each year, just above the contingency there on Parks SDCs. So those are the capital outlays from SDCs. And then if you turn to page 138, which is Parks donation, you also see the capital outlays that are going into some of those park projects of 350,000 and another 45,000. So taking those funds together leads to the park projects that are going to be done, if that makes sense. We're pulling from multiple different dedicated funding sources.
Thank you. Ms. Arnella.
I recall from last budget cycle, and I know you all weren't here, but I'm sure you can speak to this. We have a lot of deferred maintenance in the parks programs, and we're planning to add a dog park. And while that is earmarked from Metro, do we have the staff to maintain a dog park? Because that's quite the investment in time, staff, materials versus a lawn and a grass park.
Yeah, so if I can speak to that, we have included the staff in the potential design of this park. Those funds actually are tied to kind of a restoration. So if you think about that large grassy lawn area, if you think on the far side across from where the road is, there's kind of like almost like a mini wetland, if you think about it. It's actually part of our stormwater infrastructure. These funds would also allow us to expand that kind of around the fencing and actually reduce our mowing needs out there. So it helps kind of eliminate, mowing is actually one of the things that we spend the most time doing in the city. So if we can convert some of that land back to more natural habitat, we'll actually be reducing our footprint and saving maintenance costs. And since those funds come directly from Metro, it's kind of a win-win in that regard.
Are those a matching grant deal?
No, so that is Metro local share. So if you remember from the 2019 bond, each jurisdiction within the Metro region was allocated a certain percentage of those bond funds. There is a process, there's an application process we have to go through, but that's our money, there is no match component.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so while we're paused, I just want to make one quick comment on the topic of capital outlay for Parks and Recreation. And this is a repeat of something that I had said at a city commission meeting a month or two ago about the Pioneer Community Center. So I know that one of the larger items on the budget is the kitchen remodel. And I just want to say one more time, so budget committee members are aware and staff, to remind staff that I think it would be smart of us as a city commission the next time that we approve the intergovernmental agreement with the city of West Lynn, who we also provide Meals on Wheels services for. They reimburse us per person served, I believe. Is that correct?
Is that how they do it? Yeah, for Medicare.
Yeah, that's correct.
And given this large capital expenditure, I think it would be wise for us when we approve that next IGA to include some sort of lump sum recognizing the capital costs that we also incur by serving the residents of West Lynn beyond just the per unit reimbursement that we get. Because I think it's fair to assume that the increased capacity of the people that we serve has contributed to the need for this remodel. So I just wanted to bring that up one more time. No other questions or comments? All right, let's continue. Oh, yes, please.
I'm wondering if you can talk about the Tree City USA designation. Is that a cost to us at all to complete that process?
So Tree City USA is the program. It's really managed by planning. We support it in addition to Public Works and everybody who works on tree process. What we're looking to do in the commission goal is look at a grant through the Oregon Department of Forestry that would support a canopy assessment. So what they would do is actually go like catalog our trees in parkland. That would be very helpful from a maintenance perspective. It allows us to know health, species, all the different things related to it, and plan for the future, particularly things like emerald ash borer. I am an evangelist on emerald ash borer since I'm from the East Coast and have seen what it can do. That could truly have a budgetary impact in the future. You look at some cities in the Michigan area, they had $4 or $5 million of unexpected costs when those trees all started to die. That's my kind of personal thought on why that's important, but from the general maintenance side, there's a ton of benefits to being able to complete that. Again, that money would come from a grant, and I believe their match component is 2 to 1. So we'd have to come up with 30%, but we can do that with, staff time, things like that.
The grant itself is pretty minimal. It's mainly staff time and tracking expenditures and work done over the course of a year. So how much time did we spend pruning trees? How many trees were removed? How many trees were replanted? Whether that be through parks project or private development, street trees. So it's really a coordination of time spent. And then I think it's a $2.50 per capita minimum investment to qualify for Tree City USA, which we've exceeded through our programs every year. So we've got it pretty dialed in at this point as to it. At the beginning, it was just trying to wrangle all the information into one place, which is really kind of the time-consuming part of it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on. All right, Parks and Rec, capital outlay. I feel like I was past the capital outlay components and we were into parks operations and then cemetery. So prior to the 25-27 biennium, cemetery expenses were recorded in the parks maintenance department. So we split those out so that we can get a more accurate expenditure and revenue understanding of how the cemetery actually operates as kind of its own distinct operational unit. What you see here are just typical operational expenditures and increases that you would expect with inflation and the maintenance required in running a cemetery. The one main project that we did talk about, and I highlighted earlier, is the phase 2 for the Parents of Murdered Children memorial at the Mountain View Cemetery. Any questions about the cemetery? Seeing none. We'll go on to the pool for aquatics. Previously, this budget was divided between 2 departments, recreation and recreation aquatics, to improve the consistency and better reflect operational oversight. We've consolidated the items from recreation that fall under the responsibilities of the aquatic and recreation manager into the recreation aquatics. This adjustment ensures a more accurate allocation of resources, recognizing that many staff members and resources serve both rec and aquatic programs. By streamlining this budget, we can enhance efficiency, improve finance tracking, and better support the shared needs of both divisions. Primarily here, labor intensive. When you're thinking of lifeguards, those are going to be at the pool. Lifeguard standards for how many lifeguards can be present, whether that be for swim lessons, open swim, swim teams that are utilizing the pool. We just finished a pretty significant capital investment in the pool as part of this biennium for the relining of the pool facility itself. So there's really no major capital outlay expected for the pool over this next biennium, just in typical inflationary increases associated with labor and materials. Any questions on the pool?
I've got a question.
Yes, please.
And I'm new, so please forgive me. Does the pool pay for itself?
No.
Easiest question you've ever.
Easiest question. I don't think I've ever seen a pool that pays for itself.
All right, just asking.
I'd make a joke about a boat, but I won't. Because we love the pool.
There's no real sinking fund for the pool either.
That was really bad.
You knew he had to have something.
Yes.
I'm wondering when the last time we did a fee comparison for use kind of across the area.
For the pool, did we do that as part of the study, or we looked at allocated costs for the pool? I'm not sure that we looked at specific comparables. Obviously, we have a brand new pool from one of our neighboring jurisdictions that has pretty aggressive fees associated with the use of the facility that are significantly higher than what Oregon City's are. But I don't think we specifically looked at a fee change for the pool.
No, the last time we would have done that would have been 2021. We did a cost recovery exercise, looking at the expenses and how they're allocated. That resulted in, I think, some cost increases over a period of time, but it's been quite some time since we've looked at it.
Okay.
All right.
I've got a couple of
Commissioner
questions.
Mitchell.
So I know cemetery income is not shown here, but in the budget that we reflected, we just, a couple of meetings ago, voted to increase charges at the cemetery. So are those reflected in the budget?
No, those are not. We would put that in once the city commission takes action.
I'm sorry, what?
They are not reflected in the budget because at the time that we built this, it had not been approved.
Okay, and it's not a lot of money.
Yeah, I think it's like
in the big scheme of
95,000.
things.
And it's to the good side.
Right.
So you're proposing to not have seasonal parks maintenance? It was like 1.5 something FTE?
Correct.
Are we going to see a difference in what the parks look like, not having that?
What was their primary responsibility? Yes, I mean, once again, trying to identify where we can reduce costs.
Yeah, so what, we'll mow a little less often, or?
That one I can actually attempt to take. We were just having a conversation about that with staff recently. What the likely or the anticipated service level impact is, those are during our busy season, primarily our weekend service staff. So large rentals, large group rentals in the parks, kind of the weekend activities that our full-time regular staff that work during the week. You know, we don't have weekend kind of service and cleanup and some of that attention. So primarily we'll be looking at some reductions in service related, not so much to mowing and that type of thing, but really to just the supplemental service to things that happen in the parks on the weekends. And Tom, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this one? All right. Next we have Pioneer Community Center. Talked a little bit already about coming from the Parks Donation Fund will be the completion of the roof replacement project to protect the integrity of that building over the long term. Once again, typical inflationary pressures and inflationary increases associated with services, utilities, maintaining existing services as they exist. Okay, we're off to, I just want to talk real quick. We didn't put slides up for the community events and administration. So this would be like, budget highlights would be concerts in the park, movies in the park, 4th of July celebration. So we did break that out so we could track those costs a little bit better. When you look at concerts in the park, it's about $90,000. The 4th of July event was $90,000, and then Trail News, the parks portion of Trail News is $76,000. That is kind of maintaining the pre-existing from previous budgets, with the exception of the 4th of July event has now become an event that we specifically line out and provide funding for as directed by the City Commission. The other one would be on page 78, 79, Ermitinger House. As part of the last budget discussion, we were asked to break out the Ermitinger House so that we can specifically see the donations, revenues, and expenditures and staffing associated with the Ermitinger House. Nothing significantly changed here, pretty much status quo on the staffing for that facility. And then the last on page 80 is the End of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. We did include, at the request of the commission as the last time, a specific breakout for the End of the Oregon Trail as well, so that these could be seen and not just in the Parks and Rec budget as a total. So you have the repair and maintenance component. Since we own the facility itself, but it's managed by a third party, the visitors' experience at that facility. So any questions on Ermitinger or EOT?
Sorry, I gotta jump back one.
Okay.
Page 77.
Sure.
On community events.
Yep.
Salary and benefits in 2023-25 was over $500,000, and this one is proposed a little over 200,000.
What did we cut out?
Did those bodies get reallocated
Yeah,
somewhere else?
because as we kind of tried to break apart Parks and Rec, because everything was in there, like cemetery was in there, aquatics, rec, Ermitinger, end of the Oregon Trail, the events. So to provide a little more clarity and specificity about each of those, we started to break those out and allocate them to the specific divisions that they exist.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that reduction
So
is
we did
because
not cut that in salaries from that
Yeah,
department.
we allocated those to where their work is actually being done.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gifford?
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the one would be the Parks admin assistant. There was a Parks and Recreation admin assistant that is not funded as part of this budget cycle.
Okay, that's right, thank you.
And I do want to clarify, when I was talking about the 4 positions that are not being filled, we actually did not fund them either, just so I'm clear when I say that. I don't know that I was crystal clear on that before, that there is no funding in this budget for those 4 positions. It wasn't just a hiring freeze, it was a hiring freeze because they're funded to June 30th and they are not funded moving forward as proposed in this budget.
The positions have not been eliminated, they're just not being filled.
Correct.
I had a different question. When you were talking about the end of the Oregon Trail, you said it's managed or maintained or something by a different organization? What organization is that?
Clackamas Heritage Partners.
Ah, okay. Do we have a dollar amount on that? That's an obvious benefit to the city.
I do not have a dollar amount. A dollar amount of.
They release their
what
own
that's worth
financial
to us?
statements. They release their own financial statements for their operations. I don't have them handy with me,
That
but
is to say, if that organization were not doing that, the city would have to incur some cost, I imagine, to
Correct.
do what they're doing. I just don't know how much we're saving by having them do it, and I think it's great that they're doing it.
I don't think we have a staffing plan for the end of the Oregon Trail.
Okay, thank you.
However, we do still supply money to them, correct?
We provide maintenance for the facility.
Okay,
And then any money would be grants that they applied for.
Okay.
We don't have an operation agreement like we do with Downtown Oregon City Association where funds are transferred every year with CHP. So we coordinate with them on maintenance and, upkeep of the facility, landscaping maintenance. But then any grants that they would apply for outside of that would be through, whether it's Metro Enhancement or events, would be competitive through the grant processes that are available for the city.
thank you. All right, let's move on to library.
All right. Oops. All right. Sorry, let me get to my notes here a little bit further. Okay, for the library, the proposed budget includes recalibration between on-call and part-time library assistants and full-time positions, the addition of a library services manager, and 1.63 part-time library assistants is offset by the elimination of 0.63 on-call part-time library assistants and 1 librarian. The library fund has had a favorable ending fund balance for the past several years, and we'll continue to monitor the additional personnel services expenses. The district property taxes, so as you recall, there's an existing library district, which is a dedicated funding source specifically for library, that's comprised of, we have one of the larger districts. It's comprised of both city residents as well as county residents that make up that district that utilize the Oregon City Library. Here we did propose adding one additional library service manager. Right now we have a manager and a director. This is a full-service library, open 7 days a week. 2 managers are not sufficient in order to cover the amount of time that that facility is open, so we are proposing an additional manager to help with some of the evening, weekend coverage, take some of the stress off of the 2 managers who essentially are on call every weekend to respond to incidences that may happen at the facility. The other part I just wanted to talk about, the capital outlay for $535,000. We have a parking lot that's actually across the street from the library for staff that needs to be repaved. We're looking at book lockers, AV upgrades to the community room, self-checkout stand replacement costs, and then coordinating with the Friends of the Library and purchasing a mobile van that could really stretch the reach of the library to some of the unincorporated areas that we serve that might not have the opportunity to come into the city as often. So really just trying to make sure that, this is one of those unique situations where it's a city facility in the city with city employees that actually serves a significant portion of the county. And so I think Greg and the library board have been really deliberative in trying to make sure that we are providing and feeling like county residents are feeling and receiving the services of the library. So how can we expand that reach to those residents? The detail here, once again, typical staffing costs, just put on here, just some of the, as we heard earlier, as utilities, whether that be natural gas, electricity, everything's going up and going up significantly. Here we got natural gas and electric at over $100,000 for that facility. So as you can see, it just continues to erode into the revenues that are available as we just try to maintain the operations that are existing on these facilities. Oops. Any questions about the library?
I have a quick question, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Gifford. So I recall in our last biennial budget that we set aside funds for book bins, and I see that they are again being proposed. So I'm curious if they were ever purchased and I never heard about them, or what happened to those funds from the previous biennium.
I'm not sure if we got a difference between the book bins and the book lockers.
Or the book lockers, that's what I meant. Sorry. Yes, thank you.
Good evening, Budget Committee members. Greg Williams, Library Director. How's that? Oh, much better. Good evening, Greg Williams, Library Director. The answer to that question, it's a rollover from last biennium. Okay. So we are working, all the libraries in Clackamas County are working with Clackamas County Procurement in order to get the same platform for book lockers so that our central office at the county can more easily manage them. I will simply say that working with Clackamas County Procurement is a process in and of itself. And so we did put out an RFP earlier this year for both book lockers and new self-check stations. We are proceeding on the self-check stations. The book locker RFP there may be some more work required on that, but we're fairly confident that we will be in a position this upcoming biennium that we'll have a contract in place through the county off of which we can make purchases for book lockers.
Great, thank you. Mr. Gifford.
While you're here, Mr. Williams, I'm tickled silly about this new vehicle that you're planning, and I don't want to go into details now about how all that's going to work, but one of the issues from a budget perspective is we have a fund for replacement and repair of vehicles. I didn't notice that the library had anything for that.
Great question. So we are also very keen on making sure that if we acquire a vehicle, we will eventually have the funds to replace it when it reaches the end of its useful life. I do believe there was, I want to say in this budget, Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's $15,000 a year that is going into the vehicle replacement fund. if I remember correctly. We have also made some adjustments to our budget for things like fuel and safety equipment and training and anticipated maintenance. But we are putting aside some money for a future replacement. We do anticipate in the future that we would still be relying on our very generous and active library, Friends of the Library Group and Oregon City Library Foundation to help with a future purchase. But we are also trying to put money away to make sure that the lion's share of that will be available when needed. Correct. So yes, $15,000 a year, $30,000 for the biennium, for this current biennium going into that vehicle replacement fund. You're welcome.
Ms. Arnello.
You had mentioned the desire to hire a new manager to cover weekend shifts. Can you help me to understand why a high-level employee is needed for that on-site management over the weekends versus an assistant or any other kind of team member?
Sure, and it's also, I will expand on what Tony said. It's not, in addition to the weekend coverage, the FTE count that shows up for the library, it's 20 FTE, but that translates to, in terms of human beings with our part-timers and our on-calls, 30 plus people. I think right now it's about 32 people. So 2 managers managing 32 people, and I will be 100% honest, as the director with everything else that I do, a lot of that falls on the shoulders of one single manager. So part of the goal is, yes, to have better weekend coverage so that we can stagger schedules, have a manager there. The other is to provide better support for our adult services and youth services teams. Nominally, I am the manager for those departments, and my time gets split a lot. As for your question about a lower classification employee, in our current, and I would defer to Patrick in HR, in our current city job classifications, we don't have another position that would be able to provide traditional management functions such as scheduling, disciplinary things that would be required. We very much prefer to have managers on site to help deal with, we get patron emergencies, we have patron behavior issues, we have facility needs, being open 7 days a week. We have facility things that go wrong, and that our experience has shown us that having a management employee who has the ability, the experience, and the authority to handle all of those things is much easier than having a represented staff member who might not have those duties in their current job description. And I don't think any job description exists where a represented library staff would be able to perform a lot of those duties.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
While we're on this subject, I just want to bring up the fact that our public safety expenditures are not exclusively what is paid for in the police department budget. So for example, our library staff deals very frequently with the homeless population, and they are also, to an extent, a part of the funds that we expend in response to the growing needs in our community. So I just wanted to point that out before we move on.
And I can't remember, was it last budget where we made the position that's partial security, partial librarian? Can
Yes,
you talk a little
correct.
bit about that in
Yep.
response to that safety specialist? Yes.
Yeah, so we did add a library safety specialist position. We deliberately did not want to have a uniformed security officer because that's not the vibe, if you will, that we're going for at the library. We want to be welcoming and inclusive. But we realized we did need a staff member who had the skills and the experience to deal with some of these escalated behavior issues that we unfortunately deal with on a fairly regular basis. So our employee, his name is Garth, he's fabulous. He has a great working relationship with OCPD. He does outreach at Father's Heart and with Love One at the Brax Laundry events. He works our circulation desk and our Carnegie desk, trying to do more library things. But when the need arises to have somebody who can more easily and has the background to deal with some of those escalated situations, it's wonderful to have him around. He does a great job.
Yes.
You had also talked about the purchase of the library van. Do you have secured parking that's gated, lighted? Where are we going to house that?
We have been talking with Public Works, and I believe that there is more of these conversations were with John before he left, but I've talked to Dana in advance. There should be space up at Public Works. So it will be in a secure facility. I'm not sure if there's interior space available, but I believe it's a covered parking space. And when we've looked at what other libraries do, that has been sufficient. For example, Malala stores their outreach vehicle at their Public Works facility, not in a completely enclosed area, just in a bay there. So we're pretty confident that it will be in good shape.
All right.
All right. Moving on.
And just for the record, we have Commissioner Smith joining us. Welcome.
For community development is made up of planning and building. The community development is responsible for working with the community to guide growth and development within the city limits. The department performs long-range planning projects and community outreach, interprets and applies the municipal code and appropriate comprehensive plan policies to propose development projects, interprets and applies construction codes and standards to approve projects, and implements the city's development policies and programs. The proposed budget includes the city commission goal by including $20,000 for creating pre-approved designs for accessory dwelling units that would be allowed throughout the city. We've also allocated about $93,000 is budgeted for the tree program through the planning department. We've been, a lot of effort has gone in the last 2 years in responding to legislative changes that have happened through multiple middle housing, climate-friendly, equitable communities, parking standards. So just a lot of effort has been going into addressing just changes that we're seeing coming down that are mandated by the state legislature that we have to respond to. I will say also that here you're going to start to see kind of how the land use process plays itself out in development. We're starting to see a slowdown related to land use applications that are being submitted. But as you can imagine, you go through planning, you get your land use approval, you then move to engineering, you get your engineering design for your subdivision or your street improvements, and then you move to the building phase. So there's a lag there that we see. So while we'll start to see a slowdown in planning, you still have building doing okay because they're the kind of the last step in the process where you're starting to pull single family housing permits, especially specifically in subdivisions. Usually it's, a year to year and a half process, but from, submittal of land use through pulling building permits and beginning construction. So while we're starting to see a decline in land use applications and revenues coming in there, the building department is starting to see all those housing units starting to come online and see those applications pick up. So we have kind of bifurcated some of our revenue projections based on what we're seeing just through pre-application conferences that tend to be an indicator of what type of land use applications are coming in, as well as just a general familiarity with available land that's out there, how many housing units have actually been approved through land use and not built yet, as well as where some of the other buildable areas are, and if we're seeing any interest in those areas to be developed in any timely fashion. So if I move into the planning department, once again, pretty standard, no major surprises here. The goal housing strategy is the $20,000 for the accessory dwelling unit, pre-approved design package. When you look at professional services, when we have things like natural resource overlay district and analysis that has to happen, we send that out, we consult that out with another firm to do those reviews for us. And then legal, so essentially we have legal department at Historic Review Board Planning Commission providing reviews of all staff reports, any appeals that happen, those type of situations that do come up. The tree program, we have about $93,000 set aside for that. And then CLG is Certified Local Government Grant, so that we are a certified local government. So really focusing on For example, we send out, if you're in one of the historic districts, about what you can do in a historic district. How do you work with Historic Review Board? What are some opportunities of grants available for, let's say, wood window replacements? So really working with our Certified Local Government Grant Program to come up with ways to educate and provide opportunities to maintain both the McLaughlin Conservation District as well as the Kenema Historic District.
Before we move on from this, I just want to add a few legislative things that may affect what this looks like. So first, there is currently a bill right now that would create, and is being championed by the governor, that would create a statewide pre-approved building outline. So recognizing that one of our strategies for pre-approved ADU concept may become moot here, depending on what that looks like. I just wanted to bring that up. And then the other one being that there is a bill, they're calling it the shot clock bill, that would require permits to be processed or otherwise be automatically approved within 90 days for certain residential permits. And so that is an additional burden that our staff will have to deal with. We know in local government that oftentimes one of the causes for these delays is that our staff often has to go back to the developers to request more information for a complete application. That timing would be included in this bill. So it gives our staff a very limited time allotment to process those without the threat of them being automatically approved by state law. So that's just another burden that will be placed upon our building department, and we need to be prepared for that.
I think what's difficult is when people hear, oh, it just has to be approved. So typically what that means is the community development, let's say it's a straight up subdivision, type 2 land use decision, community development department issues the decision. That decision is appealable for 14 days, of which then we have another 14-day comment period or notice period. Gets to city commission, they have to have the hearing, issue a decision. So that's actually the final decision if there's an appeal. So now you start working that backwards. 120 days was tough to get this done, especially when you have commissions that meet, twice a month, meeting those deadlines. So hopefully there's I don't know, someone who actually does planning, talking to the legislature about how these things work before they just require these changes to be made.
Yes.
Is there a possibility that an unscrupulous developer could submit an incomplete application just with the sheer intent of delaying the process, knowing that it can't be delayed?
Well, so when an application is submitted, we have 30 days to deem it complete. So within that 30 days, we either deem it complete or we say, you're missing X, Y, and Z. The developer then has the option to submit X, Y, and Z, or submit X and say, we're not going to submit anything else, proceed with the application, at which point the current 120 clock starts. So it's a two-step process of completeness, and then the actual decision clock starts. I suppose someone could turn it in and just say, I'm not going to give you anything else, and then we just see how it shakes out through the process.
Any other questions or comments?
One
Yes,
of the
Commissioner
things,
Mitchell.
one of the things that's kind of been bounced around is the possibility of a tree canopy survey. Is there any funding in this budget to start that process?
I think we were looking at to try to identify grant funding for that.
Okay.
So no, we did not allocate general fund or additional money. It was to try to identify grant funding opportunities to do that work.
Great, thank you.
Can you clarify what the 93,000 for the tree program is then?
I'm sorry?
The 93,000 for the tree program is then? What is that?
Friends of Trees program that we've been utilizing over the last several years. It also kind of goes into, it counts as part of our Tree City USA, but we were collecting funds through mitigation for fee in lieu of tree replacement. Then we started using those funds for Tree City. Why am I drawing a blank? The Friends of Trees. Sorry. For the Friends of Tree program that we've done for the last several years to try and increase plantings throughout neighborhoods in the city.
right, moving on.
Okay. Building department, not a lot here. The one thing about the building department is this is not kind of, it is a dedicated fund. So the building division, which is housed in the community development department, operates under dedicated funding that requires revenues generated by permits to be utilized for building division expenses only. The building division anticipates sustaining increased permitting activity moving forward. This fund is healthy. Their staffing levels are adequate. Not a lot to add on building. Any questions?
Let's move on.
Okay. All right, moving on. We're entering into Public Works. So for the engineering is located, we can start on page 98, but then through page 104. This is responsible for the planning, design, construction, and database mapping for Oregon City public infrastructure, including capital improvements projects, development projects, and asset management. Revenues are forecasted conservatively in response to uncertainties about the regional and national economy and legislation. Once again, this kind of goes hand in hand with land use. As we see land use applications either slow down or shrink in size or not come in, it directly impacts the engineering department, which is responsible for reviewing all those applications that come in. So the planners kind of look at the larger scale of a subdivision application, let's say. Once it gets approved, it moves on to engineering, where they're looking at roadway design standards, public streets, public water, public sewer, making sure those reviews are compliant with all of our standards. So they are also collecting a fee based on the cost of those improvements, which is the revenue generated for that private side engineering review. So as you can imagine, as those decline, so do the revenues coming into this department. It's once again, we're seeing a slowdown. We're anticipating a slowdown moving forward here. We did, as part of this budget, decreased one senior construction inspector that is currently vacant, decreased one senior project engineer position in response to the decline that we're seeing. Any questions on engineering?
Mr. Peterson.
I just noted in charges for services that you're anticipating that the revenue levels decline pretty significantly. 400,000, probably 45%.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So that's and is that only on the development side? You don't internally charge your engineering services to your utilities for design, as an example?
There is internal service charges 2 lines down from that on page.
I see them, yeah.
101.
Yeah.
So I think what the charges for services are from external sources, and the internal service charges are what the engineering department does charge to water, sewer, storm, and transportation.
To do the work then for the other operating divisions.
Right, like if we did a water line through WIFIA, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we would charge that back if we're utilizing that service. But yeah, so yeah, you can see on charges for services, that's the decline that we're talking about from private revenue that we're expecting associated with applications coming in for development. Okay. Any questions about engineering fund? All right, moving on. For transportation, The Transportation Fund accounts for two organizational units, transportation and pavement maintenance. General transportation expenditures, including staffing and materials and services for general maintenance and construction, are funded by gas tax revenues and Clackamas County vehicle registration fees. The pavement maintenance fees fund the annual pavement repair and roadway reconstruction contracts. These revenues and expenses are kept segregated for accountability. Materials and services include the pavement maintenance program, which includes $1.7 million for contracted services and materials. It also contains $416,000 for running the elevator, which is funded by a transfer from the general fund. Capital outlay includes $468,000 for Highway 213 and Beaver Creek turn lane, $500,000 for Main Street from 10th to 15th reconstruction project, $4.7 million for roadway reconstruction, and $360,000 for sidewalk and bike lane infill. And so, get to transportation, sorry. So those were the major transportation projects and expenditures that I just kind of went through. And then, oops, back up one. So are there any questions concerning the transportation fund or pavement maintenance?
Yes.
I'm wondering if the Highway 213 Beaver Creek turn lane is being funded or being brought up because of safety concerns, or why are we taking on that project just yet?
So there's a capacity issue, there's a safety issue. We needed to create a special transportation area designation for the intersection of Beaver Creek and 213, even though a vast majority of those trips do not start or stop in Oregon City, but it's impacting our ability to provide development in the city limits. So we have identified this project to alleviate some of the capacity issues and movements from Beaver Creek onto 213 northbound towards 205. We've also requested funding from the state. This is an ODOT facility intersecting a county facility that is significantly impacting Oregon City.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Great. The water fund. Oops, went too far. Okay, the Water Utility Division operates and maintains the city's potable water distribution system, including distribution and system maintenance. The sources of potable water supply for the city is surface water from the lower Clackamas River, which is drawn and treated by the South Fork Water Board. South Fork is a wholesale water supplier that is equally owned by Oregon City and the city of West Linn. The proposed budget includes approximately $4.8 million in water purchases from South Fork Water Board, and approximately $14.9 million in capital projects, including pipe replacement and upgrade projects. Oops, sorry, yep. So included in this for capital outlay, so we have the Henrici Pump Station in Maine at $6.4 million, the Malala Avenue Transmission Main at $5.9 million, McLaughlin Neighborhood Main at $1.7 million, and other projects for about $740,000. So as you may recall, we were successful in getting a WIFIA loan. So really a lot of this funding is coming from that WIFIA loan that we were able to do, and then implementing these larger capital projects over the next 4 to 5 years related to water. Right now, the big one for us is the Malala transmission line that's kicking off from Mountain View through Beaver Creek. Any questions about water utility?
All right, we'll keep moving on.
Okay. Next, we have wastewater. The Wastewater Utility Division maintains the city's wastewater collection system. The city's wastewater collection system includes 14 pump stations and 139 miles of both force main and gravity pipes, all of which serve over 11,340 customers. Once the wastewater is collected, it is treated by the Water Environmental Services wastewater treatment plant. The proposed budget includes $13.5 million of pass-through payments for wastewater treatment and system development charges received from city customers and remitted to Water Environmental Services. The budget also continues funding to implement the inflow and Infiltration and Inflow Reduction Program, or I&I, beginning with high priority areas in the McLaughlin neighborhood, Lynn Basin, and Newell Basin. Total capital outlay of $15 million is dedicated to pipeline renewal and replacements. So once again, I think the main thing here is I think the I&I program has been a really great success. This is a partnership with Water Environmental Services where they're paying 33% of the I&I construction cost on a reimbursement basis. So essentially levering a dollar for every $2 that we spend on that project, really expanding the ability for us to address I&I, hopefully reducing the amount of water that is essentially clean groundwater getting into the system that then we have to pay to not only transport and build capacity for, but then also treat before we put it back into the system. So this program continues to move forward in a pretty aggressive and productive way.
And is also award-winning, correct?
Yes, it is.
There will be.
I think that happened on last Friday. Yeah.
Well, no, that's this week.
Oh, that's this. Oh, that's a
Yes,
secret
the
still.
League of Oregon Cities Conference is happening right now, and the city is receiving an award for this project. And none of us will be there to accept it.
We sent a video. Any questions on stormwater or on wastewater? Nope. Okay, stormwater. The Stormwater Utility Division remains the city's stormwater management system, which includes conveyance, flood control, and pollution remediation and reductions. The National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or NPDS, newly issued MS4 permit. The Joyce Court and Van Buren Street stormwater improvements at a combined total of $604,000 are the significant stormwater projects, with the majority of the construction occurring during the second year of the biennium. Currently, the budget funds $1.3 million for various outfall rehabilitation projects throughout the city. These are the projects that we've identified over the next 2 years. All right, moving on, system development charges.
Chair Merle,
Yes.
can we take 5?
Yes. We will recess and reconvene at 7:46.
questions, but this one.
That's all right. That's, yes, perfect. All right, we are back. I will call back to order the City of Oregon City Budget Committee meeting. If everyone could please take their seats. Before we move on, Mr. Hunt has a question.
No, I'm sorry, after he presents.
Oh, okay, after he presents. So let's pick up where we left off, please.
Let's go ahead and get started with system development charges, page 125. System development charges, or SDCs, are charged as part of the permitting process for new development. The purpose of the charges is to fund future capacity increasing projects as required due to growth. Oregon City imposes and expends system development charges according to Oregon law. As mentioned previously, funds are maintained separate for each of the 5 divisions collecting SDCs. Transportation SDC capital outlay budget stayed relatively consistent from prior bienniums at $5.8 million. Included in this are some of the projects that we've discussed, including Main Street from 10th to 15th, $4.8 million, $500,000 funded, $4.3 million SDC funded, paid for by $3.9 million in state grant funds. Highway 213 and Beaver Creek Road, once again, multiple funding sources associated with that project. Washington Street Corridor, $500,000. This is leveraging additional federal funding that we received for sidewalk improvements along Washington Street. The WIFIA project, the Henry C. Pump Station and Transmission Lane. And then another WIFIA project, water transmission improvements that are partially SDC funded. At the very top, one of the goals of the commission was to look at 2 of our facilities that we've identified that are gonna probably the ones that are gonna need significant investment sooner rather than later. That includes the Oregon City Pool, as well as the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. So with that, we've allocated $150,000 for each of those projects to do public engagement and master planning for what do they become as we move forward. Let's see. Are there any questions about system development charges?
Yes, please.
Tony, can you talk about, so on page 125, the last line, the reserved for future expenditures, it looks like last biennium, you all budgeted nothing in that line, reserved for future expenditures, and this proposal is for a little over $3 million. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, can you hit on contingency versus reserve for future? You see it?
So that's primarily for the transportation system development charge. If you look on page 126, you can see that same balance, 3008, and I do not remember. Give me 1 second. It's for a future construction project at Highway 213 in Beaver Creek. Prior years did not have any money set aside for that, but at this point, this budget does have that $3 million in reserves for that project.
Am I understanding that correctly, that that project would occur not in the coming biennium, but in the one beyond that?
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact point at which it'll come to fruition. Dana may remember that better, but yeah, that by being in the reserve for future expenditure is not anticipated that it would be spent in this biennium. If the project did come to fruition sooner, the commission could, through a resolution transfer, pull it back out and use it. It's a little bit different than unappropriated ending fund balance, which you wouldn't find here in the SDC funds.
So if I might just ask one more follow-up, so the entirety of that $3 million plus is for that one project?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Ms. Arnello.
Can you clarify what was done to the pool this year? I recall you all talking about it in Parks and Rec, and what is to be slated to be done for the $300,000?
So for the pool, we just completed essentially refinishing the whole pool bottom itself. So that was the major capital project. So this is really looking at, I believe the pool was built in 1950.
Last century.
Yes. And so part of the discussion has been what comes next for the pool. The pool is at its life end here. And so part of this process is to determine what does the pool become, how big is it, where is it located, how do we pay for that moving forward. So this is really a master planning process to kind of have that public engagement, communication, as well as design of what do we do next.
But no physical construction to the
No, this is a master planning, design, public engagement process and funding.
Mr. Gifford?
Do I understand that the parks STCs have not quite yet been firmed up?
I'm sorry, the parks SDCs?
Have not been firmed up? I mean, do we have a fixed number on them yet? Wasn't there going to be a public hearing about their SDCs?
I believe it's coming up. I think we had a 90-day notice or 60-day notice before we could have the hearing on the SDCs, so I'm pretty sure they're ready to go. We're just waiting for the date to bring them for approval.
We don't anticipate any changes in them, though. Is that right?
I don't know. It's not up to me.
It'll depend on the hearing, okay. It's just, it seems a little odd to budget stuff when we don't have a firm number on it, but you do what you can, I guess.
You do what you can with what you know.
Any other questions?
last.
Yes.
Do we have an estimate on end of life for the pool, like when we're no longer limping it along?
2005.
Thank you.
I mean, I give a lot of credit to staff, right? They work tremendously hard to keep that thing running, finding parts, doing what they can to extend its life.
Understood.
Yep.
Thank you. Let's keep moving on.
Okay. Oops. For community facilities includes the public building projects. There's a small set aside for future police municipal court facility and future library facility capital needs from savings on the expenses. Each project's funding is restricted and segregated. The total budget for each project is shown.
Tony, I'm sorry.
Here.
We have fleet services next,
Oh.
or are we missing?
Did we skip one?
Sorry to interrupt.
Hold on, let me make sure my slides aren't in the right long order. Oops. Did we miss the fleet fund? Yeah, thanks. So. Yeah, not a lot here. So for the fleet, manages the purchase, maintenance, and repair of the city's fleet and equipment. This includes passenger vehicles, dump trucks, street sweepers. Fleet division also oversees the city's fuel station, which consists of both gas and diesel fuel tanks and pumps. That is something that's been a benefit when we did purchase the First Street facility, was being able to take gas and diesel purchases in-house for fleet. So we maintain that tank pump station associated with that, and have really been trying to expand that for use for city vehicles as much as possible, providing access training to get into the facility to utilize those. And really, what we see with fleet, we really manage it through police department has their fleet, and then Public Works maintains a list of all the other fleet across the departments on a replacement schedule. So really, it's just been trying to make sure that we're staying on and putting money away, regardless if we buy 2 or 10. Looking at it over that long-term life cycle of what those vehicles may be. And going through this budget process, we did make assumptions and extended and removed some vehicle purchases, and are gonna continue to use vehicles a little bit longer than the life cycle is calling for, to try to reduce some of the costs that we are anticipating coming forward. So, really this is something that we've been in place for several years. We continue to manage it consistently with how we have in the past. Really trying to make sure we don't get hit with significant surprises of expenditures that we didn't anticipate if something were to break or multiple vehicles were to be damaged. Any questions on fleet?
All right.
Now I think we got to community facilities. All right. So once again, each project funding is restricted and segregated. So we have funds set aside for public works, the library, transfer for debt on community safety bond of 2.2 million, and then the contingency. So for the public works facility projects, they include the decant facility. So right now, the old Center Street, the lower yard facility is where our decant is. So the street sweeper goes, drops so he can dewater what's been collected to reduce the weight of the debris that we have to get rid of. We need to relocate that. So we're looking at relocating it up at by Mountain View Reservoir. That'll be the last major infrastructure investment we need to make to be able to decide what to do with Center Street. Essentially, once the decant is moved, all operational needs from lower yard at Center Street will be completely removed. So the decant facility construction, a magnesium chloride and sanding rock facility for another $550,000. So this is our winter response. Materials, the warehouse roof replacement at First Street, some loading dock doors, some sound attenuation improvements, and then just some miscellaneous improvements over at First Street. The C-Safe, so many of you are aware, we collect $6.50 for all utility providers. It brings in about 1.1-ish million per year. So that is essentially the revenue that is generated to pay off the debt for the construction of this facility. So it's essentially we collect those funds, transfer it, pay the debt on this building.
Mr. Gifford.
Would this be an appropriate time, since you were mentioning the Center Street facility, the former Public Works facility, has that property been appraised?
No.
What would stop us from getting it appraised?
When we're ready to move forward with deciding what to do with the property, we would probably move then to purchase and sale, appraisal, anything else that we need to do to get that property ready for sale, depending on what the commission decides they'd like to do with that property.
Is that on our radar for this biennium?
It's on our radar, yes.
Yeah, seems like the first step would be get an appraisal. What's it even worth? I would think.
It's up to the commission, or the commission can decide what they'd like to do with it, and then we can decide if we need an appraisal.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Page 133 on the Community Facilities Fund, second year of the biennium, 1.25 million sale of assets. What is that?
Was that the assumption on Center? I think that was it right there, no? Yeah, that was the assumption on Center Street.
Okay.
WAG. Don't know where it's gonna be, but had to put something in related to a revenue potential. The other thing we're gonna have to figure out on Center Street is where it came from. Originally, when we did the upper yard, it was part of the original water board and dedicated to the city. But then through the years, Public Works had also bought additional properties. So when we transferred those properties to the Parks Department, there was some reimbursement necessary back to the utilities because some of those properties were bought by the utilities versus some of them that were dedicated to the city originally when the original land transfer happened from the water board to the city. So additional research on how lower yards, the Center Street property that still exists, was purchased and maintained, as well as the two parking lots across the street would need to be conducted before we know. So I guess what I'm saying is don't assume 1.2 million is for the general fund. Some of that may be applicable to the Public Works utilities if that property was bought with utilities.
And it would have to be allocated back to those because those were dedicated fund money that were used to purchase it.
Right, rather than just fungible general fund money.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Okay.
In passing, I heard you say something about a roof at First Street?
So yeah, there was, I think the warehouse in the back, some replacement, some roof work needs to happen on the back part of that facility.
Okay, and that, because that was the existing part of the building, I'm just thinking about how new that is.
No,
But
yes,
your Existing.
it's the very back part.
Okay.
Yeah, is that
Okay.
correct, Dana?
Got it, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Public Works and participating departments evaluate the city's fleet to recommend new or replacement vehicles based on need, age, maintenance costs, and safety concerns. Department makes annual transfers into this fund to accumulate savings for current and future purchases. The proposed budget is 12.1 million, includes 4.26 million in purchases and 7.8 million in ending reserves. Here we have the expenditures for public works equipment, police and code enforcement equipment, parks and cemetery equipment, facilities, equipment, and vehicles. This is consistent with, as I described earlier, our replacement schedule, as well as extending some of those and reducing some of the purchases that would typically have made.
So we are stretching beyond useful life. That always bothers me when we start talking about useful life. In a couple of months, I'm going to celebrate our 50th anniversary, and I've never bought anything new because the old one hit useful life. So sometimes I think we get hung up on that, instead of using it until it breaks or until it becomes too costly to repair.
And I think that was part of the discussion, is how many of these are needs versus, or could we get a couple more years out of some of these, right? When you start looking at the replacement cost versus the maintenance cost. And so there were some purchases that we identified that we could delay.
Okay, so you feel like you've already gone through that
I do.
process?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Dang it. I was looking at some of those line items.
Well, I mean, and just remember, like, some of these, though, too, are dedicated funds, so they're not necessarily going to help the general fund, right? So you're looking at police and code, probably, and we had reduced their car purchases back from what they had requested already. Parks and cemetery, I know we removed some equipment purchase requests from that as well. Public Works isn't really going to help you on the general fund. Facilities is probably a conglomeration of funding sources, so.
I think it was a couple of dump trucks that caught my eye.
For parks?
Yeah.
Yeah. We want me to bring up Tom and Scott to talk about it, or?
Pardon?
Would you like me to bring up Scott and Tom to talk about the need for the dump trucks, or?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I wouldn't mind hearing a little more about that.
Well, the guy that probably knows the answer better had to leave. Tom had to leave, and so I just had a brief conversation today with our maintenance supervisor about the need for those, and I believe the replacement of those were kind of what you were just talking about, is whether we can extend life and get more use out of them. I understand that we've been doing that already with these vehicles, and that we've kind of reached that point. So I can get you a better answer than that, but that's my sort of high level understanding, is that we've been stretching these particular vehicles for a while. Be happy to provide a better answer.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. We'll have to come back with additional.
Okay, we will get a follow-up for that.
All right. So staff in the Utility Customer Service Fund provide utility billing, collections, and general customer service. Staff in the Fleet Service Fund maintain the city's fleet, excluding police vehicles. The fleet staff has previously, was previously budgeted in the across the 4 utility funds. This budget cycle, the staff have been reallocated into the fleet fund to better capture the true costs of the internal service fund. In addition, the city is now utilizing on-site gas pumps, at the Public Works Operation Complex, resulting in fuel cost savings across all departments. The fleet department manages the fuel and the gas pumps. So really, I think one of the big changes here is how we allocate. We're trying to more precisely allocate the internal service charge for the work that the mechanics do in fleet, as well as the purchases that they're making. So that would be the one change here. It's not necessarily going to change budgetarily. It's going to change how we account for and accommodate, thank you, and track the actual costs of providing that service to each of the departments. So how much time is truly being spent on wastewater trucks versus stormwater trucks, or, planning vehicle. So trying to get a better and equitable allocation of those costs that we do internally here. Any questions on other funds? Internal? All right, debt service. The public employees retirement systems unfunded actuarial liability bonds were issued by the city in 2005 in the amount of $17 million to fund its PERS actuarial liability. These bonds will mature in the year 2028. The city issued $16 million of voter-approved full faith and credit obligation bonds dated June 5th, 2018 to provide a new police and municipal court facility. Revenues to pay the $2.2 million in principal and interest come from a transfer of community safety advancement fee utility fees designated for such purpose. The city closed a Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, or WIFIA, loan agreement with the Federal Environment Protection Agency on July 20th of 23. Drawdowns on the loan have begun and will continue through the 25-27 biennium. The city will begin making interest-only payments on the WIFIA loan in the year 2026. Oregon City will have an estimated $20.35 million in debt outstanding at the beginning of this budget biennium, or as of July 1, 2023, which is very low for a city of Oregon City's size. Any questions on outstanding debt service? Nope. Okay. General donations are collected and tracked for the cemetery, pool, Pioneer Center, Ermitinger, and RV dump. Meals on Wheels donations are specific to the program. The city's parks donation is specific to Clackamas Park. In the current biennium, donations were used to fund the pool, retaining wall, and the pollinator garden. In the upcoming biennium, the roof replacement for $291,000 at the Pioneer Community Center is being funded from the Parks Donations Fund. Additionally, in the upcoming biennium, the Parents of Murdered Children Phase 2 project is being funded at $38,500 at the cemetery through the Park Donation Fund. Park donation funds for other projects in this biennium include the Wesley Lynn Swing Set, Rivercrest ADA, playground improvements, and memorial benches. Any questions on the Parks Donation Fund? This is also one of the improvements we made from the last budget cycle in terms of more specificity as to the specific funds, making them a little more transparent, readable, and understandable where they're at and where they're being allocated to. Okay. So one slide that's not in here, we are asking for one budget change. It is for the Holmes Lane paving project. It's a $500,000 as part of the pavement maintenance utility fee. The cost of home lanes paving is $500,000. This request is that it be added to the fiscal year 26 for the pavement maintenance capital outlay and decrease the contingency accordingly. So a lot of work has gone on Holmes Lane, both from private development of additional housing units, as well as a significant water line and projects that we've done in that road. It is beat up. We were originally going to do Holmes Lane later, essentially another year out. We're proposing to pull that project forward to get that done sooner rather than later. If that's acceptable, we'll incorporate those changes as part of the final that we bring forward. So in summary, the proposed budget is balanced, funds core services and the city commission goals, and there are no increases to fees beyond inflation rate adjustments, and the tax rate remains at $4.409 for both years of the biennium. So thank you for your time, and look forward to answering any of your questions and help you get through this process.
All right, thank you, Tony. And colleagues, just before we get into further questions, I just wanted to say a few things. So first, thank you again, Tony, thank you staff for all the work that has been put into this. I know that this has not been an easy budget to form. Recognizing that Mayor McGriff and Commissioner Wilson are not here, and also that some outstanding questions over what the final urban renewal collection rate will be. I think that it would be good if we spend a little bit of time discussing and digesting what we went through tonight, but still holding off on decisions until our next scheduled meeting, where we will hopefully have our entire committee present for some more thorough deliberations. And I would also request a few things. So first, of committee members, looking through and trying to see which areas you think you would like to see or not like to see, but areas that could be cut in response to other wants that you may have. So having those prepared with you when we come to our next meeting. And then I also think, not saying that this will be the case, but for our general knowledge, having some information written about what certain tax increases per however many cents could yield in revenue. I think that would be helpful for us in our deliberations. Again, not saying that that's going to be the case, and recognizing that the current budget as proposed does not propose any tax increases, but I will say, like the people who testified today at public comment, I also have concerns about leaving those police positions vacant. I think that there is a middle ground that we could possibly find, given that the homeless liaison officer position has been vacant for a couple of years now, and we have invested in other areas to deal with that, but then looking at how we may be able to backfill the traditional police role as maybe a compromise for that. So I just wanted to lay that out there first, but discussion, committee members. Mr. Hunt.
Before we get too far away from the Holmes Lane, I assume the Holmes Lane addition is not general fund. I assume that's SDCs or transportation dollars or something.
It's our pavement maintenance utility fee program, so it has its own dedicated funding source.
Great.
Further questions or comments? Mr. Gifford?
I'm not quite clear why we aren't wrapping this up. Because we're missing two members of the committee?
Well, no, not because we're missing two members, but because we're still waiting to have final decision from the Urban Renewal Commission as to how much they're going to choose to levy. And that's going to impact the final amount that we have to work with. And I also think that now that we have the entire presentation behind us, that we can then take some time individually to look at where there may be cuts, and also giving staff the time to give us the information about what potential revenue sources could bring in to backfill the asks that have been presented to us.
Two questions, and when is the Urban Renewal Commission meeting?
Next week.
May 7th.
Okay. Secondly is, we talk so much about cuts, and perhaps as an opportunist, I would like to see what can we do to increase our funding, and to increase, one of the methods that was mentioned was the sale of Center Street, which not only would bring an immediate cash, but it would increase property taxes as well. When that land is developed, we're going to be getting even more property taxes. And when we do get around to getting an appraisal for that property, I would like to have some sort of an estimate as to how much that would return to the city in property taxes.
Thank you. So as it relates to revenue sources, I think that was what I was trying to get at when I requested that we get some sort of chart outlining what those potential increases would look like in terms of actual dollars. And then I do agree, and I know that all of us on the city commission have been trying to push the Center Street sale for a while. And I think that could be a good, more or less one-time boost to the general fund, and recognizing that there will be property taxes collected from it, we do have to also recognize that the bulk of the money that we're going to be getting is just that one time from that sale, depending on whatever that timeline looks like with the appraisal and if it were to be sold. So I do want to caution us from I think a lot of decisions that have been made in past biennial budget cycles where we have been heavily dependent upon one-time sales to backfill shortfalls, as well as other ways that are not going to translate into future biennia as a stable revenue source. But I do agree with you. I absolutely would like to get those back on the tax rolls as well.
Yeah. We'll provide, we have a breakdown of, based on current assessed value, or essentially 10 cents is $410,000. But we will provide that in the next packet. We have a spreadsheet of the available revenue, or the available taxing capacity that we have. And then, the other component would be, we have direct costs associated with, let's say, like the community safety advancement fee, right? So $6.50 equals 1.1 something something. So we can provide both of those as examples of revenues. There was a conversation about the flower basket program and some of those, and where those fees come from. I just want to let folks know that we had to pre-order those in order to have them ready. So, that we kind of hedged here a little bit and put the orders in. So, essentially that first year revenue is already spent. So just to make everyone aware that it's not as easy as just canceling, an order, as we've already placed this one and are probably going to receive it pretty soon.
Does not mean we cannot have a city flower basket sale.
Hopefully we don't lose money on it. And then, I appreciate the comments about Center Street. I agree with Commissioner Morrill. That'd be a one-time increase. Potentially we could break down what a, $3 million, $5 million, $10 million building brings in, and with, you apply $4.41 per thousand on the assessed value. The one thing I would just say is that as part of the discussion and why we were a little hesitant to put a lot in there is I think the commission still needs to decide what they want to do with those properties. There was a lot of discussion about workforce housing opportunities, partnering with a land bank. So, potentially you lose some of that assessed value if you do get into a land banking type of a system where you can't just assume that it's just going to go straight onto the tax roll. But, we can certainly come up with numbers. I mean, it's just a math equation.
And that assumes it'll sell immediately. I mean, it could be on the market for years.
Well, to rebuild, you're looking at 2 years to build anything.
The other opportunity that we don't want to forget is the potential for increased property taxes available from a development of the former courthouse site, which could be significant.
It's not going to happen in this biennium. Eventually, but yeah.
Yes.
I'd like to ask for actually a couple of three things. One, I'd like to have a matrix that tells me where transfer in and out are going, because I've got all of these transfers and all the various funds, and I don't know their source and their input and their outputs. I want to know what's going where to what fund and why. So I need a sense of what that would occur. I would like to see the internal service allocations. You all have indicated that the internal services have gone up fairly dramatically, but I can't get to the details of what those amounts are. And somewhere you've generated all of that because you've put it together and put the budget together. So I'd just like to see what those look like. And then my final is I'm concerned about the policy of the amount of contingency, reserve, and unappropriated fund balance that we perceive as necessary in our general fund. Because that will have a substantial impact on what our determinations may be. Let's drive that down to 6%.
6?
Yeah, and see what occurs. What's interesting, take a look at what is occurring around the state and look what the numbers are. Don't anticipate that they are at the MFOA recommendation levels, because they aren't. So let's just take a look and be realistic about what those reserves really need to be or have to be. And I'd like to at least have a conversation about that, not saying that we have to drive them down, just that there is the availability to be able to do that.
So I think that would be a worthwhile discussion. I also would request for that specific item that there be an estimate as to how a reduction in contingencies might affect the ability for us to borrow, and whether that affects our credit rating or any other outsized ability for us to make those expenditures in the future. Because it will be a balance, so.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, we've certainly had the discussion about, you know, when our budget was smaller, right, the 17% for the 2 months operating to get us through as the tax collection comes on, and then the 10% in case there was an emergency. When our budget was smaller, obviously that number was less, and there was less ability for something to go wrong. I'll just say I was here when the Blue Ribbon Task Force was created because we were broke and about to go bankrupt, and the only thing that saved us was getting into the fire district. So I'm very sensitive to ending fund reserves, but I do agree, we've had that conversation. Like, we've got the 17%, and then we've got 10% on top of that, right? So the 10% is about 3.6, 3.5? Am I correct on that? But, you know, so the question was, is like when we had the ice storm, right? That was $1.2 million to go pick up sticks. You know, and so it was, but we had those reserves available to us, right? So I agree. Does it need to be 2 million, right? Or 10, right? Whichever's less. I mean, I agree. We've having that discussion as well.
I'm not saying that it ought to change.
Yep.
It's a conversation.
Yep. Understood.
Yep. One of the things that would do, and I think that's a great point, I would agree with that. It's actually something that culturally or even nationally, I guess, the GFO, the Government Finance Officers Association, has been having think tank discussions about how much reserves are enough and how do you structure them, not just a percentage of, you know, operational expenditures, but, you know, evaluate the risk, et cetera. So we've talked about that, and as an example, the last emergency that we had was 1.1 million that we had to have on hand to be on operations to flush out, and then we recouped about 75 to 90% of that from the federal government. Don't know if that'll be available in the future either, but you know, there's that, and there's also, you know, whatever the risk of litigation, risk of you know, labor, et cetera. So, but that policy will only, that is a one-time gain in that policy. So just so, I mean, I think you understand that, but just so you know, that will not affect one iota the structural deficit. All it will do is buy you more time. So if you have $12 million in the bank and you're burning $2 million year over year, and suddenly you get another $5 million, well, that just buys you future years before you run out of money. That is if we were to free up ending fund balance for more availability, that's going to essentially buy us a few more years. But I'm just offering that explanation that does not address the structural deficit. It does not affect spending more than we bring in on an annual basis. So just keep those two things in mind. Well, I appreciate your comment. Thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, I think hopefully Matt and I are doing a little better job of explaining, like, we're fortunate to be where we're at with our ending fund balance. We've made good decisions, but we have this structural imbalance. So even though our beginning fund balance looks high and we're able to make it 2 years and be at 27%, it's because we're burning down our reserves faster than we're bringing them in. So the structural imbalance is what we've been trying to focus on which is really trying to address those reoccurring costs. And for us, because we're such a service-provided organization, that's the FTE count, unless we're going to get into programmatic or facility shutdowns. And I think you realize, like I said, it's hard because the number looks good at the beginning and it looks good at the end, but it's because we've made some pretty prudent decisions to get to where we're at. We're just running into this issue of staffing levels versus revenues growth that's not keeping up with expenditure growth.
Mr. Gifford?
One last thought. At a recent presentation, I made some comments to the speaker from Eco Northwest. He was really praising traded sector businesses. And I want to draw an analogy. A traded sector business that is bringing money in from outside the area where the money is being spent. I have a traded sector business. I bring money in from all over the world and I spend it here in Oregon City. That's a traded sector business. And I'm drawing the analogy to our tourist opportunities. And that's another thing that as we build this DDMMOO, whatever it is, that the MMO, thank you, I can't spell it, but I understand it, that as our tourist industry increases, that will bring money in from outside. It's not going to impact the taxes of our existing citizens. It's not going to require additional grants, just to promote it. But getting that extra money in, to me, is an analogy to a traded sector business where we bring money in from outside so that we can spend it in here.
Wish we had a sales tax, then it would actually help us. We don't get income tax, we don't get sales tax. So all we get is property tax in the TRT. So yes, we would get some additional from the hotel. But that's the hard part, is that, yes, it's great for the businesses and the income tax that goes to the state. It'll probably drive up some property value that's capped at 3% a year. So, I mean, the hard part, when you want to be a tourism state and you don't charge a sales tax, is you don't actually collect any of the impacts and revenue that comes from it.
Yeah, I hear you.
And just to add on to that, while it does bring in more investment in tourism dollars, it does exact also city services and infrastructure on our city as well, which is always something to keep in mind. So colleagues, we can continue deliberating for, okay, so I see a couple hands and then, let's start with that, Mr. Hunt.
I think we just need tourists who buy a lot of lottery tickets, alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana, yeah.
We can arrest them.
I think the budget process, I think, is really amazing. I've been through lots of other budget processes. I think you and your team do an amazing job. It's like right at the right pace, lots of information. It doesn't feel like a steamroller, which I've certainly been through budget processes that feel like that before. I think, looking and thinking about all the discussion we've had, the public testimony we've had, I really see two principal shortcomings in this entire document, which ain't bad. And I think they're really the two sides of the livability coin for me. One is police on the street, which I think we've heard about, and my guess is we probably all agree with. The other, at least for me, is code enforcement. I think you all, 2 years ago, did a great job increasing code enforcement, have seen the benefit of it. As I understand it, unlike the homeless liaison officer, which has been vacant for a couple of years, I think the code enforcement position is a much more recent vacancy. And that feels like, again, on the two sides of the coin of livability, that feels like one that would be a real step backwards. So I guess I would say, thinking ahead about our next meeting, for me, those two areas, I think those two changes would make this a really strong budget.
Can I ask you, I sensed a pushback to not having 7-day coverage for code enforcement.
Yeah.
So with the staffing level that is proposed with the one reduction, if there could be 7-day, would that address the concern, or is it a numbers?
I think it would depend on how many calls that person can handle over the weekend.
Well, or we put 2 people on the weekend and 1 on the weekday? I mean, I'm trying to get to what are we trying to address? Is it a purely, it's a numbers thing, or is it
It's the coverage.
thing, issue?
For me, it's coverage.
Yes. So if there is a way to make that possible, I think that would be very helpful for us.
Because like right now, I think they're on 410s, you know, do we look at 5/8s? Do we look at other alternatives, right? Do we change, I mean, if the goal is to have 7-day coverage, that's different than they need to have the same number of FTEs. So I'm just trying to understand what the goal is here.
Coverage.
I mean, for me, maybe it is partially the 7 days, but I think it's also, it feels like you all, 2 years ago, made a decision that enhanced code compliance. And having lived in unincorporated Clackamas County, where code compliance is basically nothing, and it shows. I've experienced the other side of that, and I just think you all made the right decision 2 years ago. So maybe it's partially 7 days, but I think it takes just enough bodies that when neighbors, and unlike some other city services, this one is really about people who live here. This is not about tourists. This is about neighbors who live here asking for code compliance.
Would it be all right as part of one of the things we also bring back is, you know, we've identified, you know, there were positions in engineering which are a little different in that they're funded a little bit differently, right? So we had kind of talked a little bit more about the ones that are specifically general fund impacting, right? So I guess I would propose, just so that when we're thinking about these discussions of, you know, here's what each one of those positions cost, right? Because if we're going to start adding back, you know, let's just say those 2 positions are, you know, $300,000 a year, right? How are we going to address that? Like I went through this 2 years ago, and we put up a list of ads and what do we want to cut, and we added everything. We didn't cut anything. All right, so I'm just trying to be upfront. Like we got red flags going off here in our minds, and I'd rather do it incrementally than get into a situation where we've got to do something a little more drastic later on.
Commissioner Mitchell.
For me, it would be helpful for me in the city commission goals section. Some of them just said staff. Some of them had some pretty substantial amounts of money, and I know they're not in the actual budget as, you know, city commission goal with a lump. So it would be helpful to me to know what some of the, especially on some of the larger amounts, what those actually are going for.
I would concur, and I would also be interested specifically to that point to see what kind of services from a contract we are expecting for the DEI consultant. I think, as we talked about at the goal-setting retreat, it's not that I am trying to be a crusader against DEI, but I would like us to take a look into what it is that we're getting from that contract, and recognizing that with this being a tough budget, we have to be looking under every rock.
So there were some that we identified that staff is going to do. You're asking more about the ones where we had revenue requests and more detail on what that revenue, what that expenditure is going to be used for. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments? I would be happy to accept a motion to recess until May 8th, 2025.
Sorry, recess.
What was that? Yes, okay. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? We are recessed until May 8th, 2025. Thank you.